Gentlemen, before we start, I just want to say a few words. You're probably all aware that ex-councillor Maurice Horsfield has died suddenly. Maurice was a borough council on Pendle Borough for 17 years. Even after he stood back from Pendle Council, he continued as a town councillor. Maurice was quite a character, as we all know. But he was extremely passionate about Earby, especially the drains in Earby. As you know, he always went on about him. And he was a good man and will be truly missed. And our deepest condolences go out to his family. So we'll all miss him very, very much. So, thank you.
Chairman, are we going to have a minute's silence?
We certainly can.
I'd like to speak afterwards.
Yeah, sure. We'll have a minute's silence. Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I first came across Maurice, I don't know, 25, maybe even 30 years ago, through his involvement with the Mines Museum and helping him and the other trustees to access funding. And Maurice was a force of nature. He, rarely, if ever, took no for an answer. And even when he and I, we agreed about flooding issues to the point of, sort of like, you could have cut both of us in half and we'd have yearly floods written through us. And Maurice was as I say, a really good man. He had lived to a ripe old age, but his life was cut short at the end, and I think that's very, very regrettable. I think Maurice would have kept on going for many years yet, and I was hugely impressed when he took to the mobility scooter that he would be seen far and wide, travelling at great speed. And I might be apocryphal, but I do recollect that one time somebody spotted home Skipton bypass.
Yeah.
Whether that is correct or not, I don't know.
It will be.
Yeah. So he's a huge loss to Earby, a huge loss to our community. A huge loss to the town council, and I just want to offer my sympathy to all of Maurice's associates far and wide, and say how very much I regret his passing, and really sad.
It is extreme. Okay, we'll move on. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Public question time. This is to receive any questions from the members of the public that's not on the agenda. Do we have any? No. Okay. minutes of the last meeting. Anyone? Seconder? Item 4, police and community issues. Got the crime figures in front of you. Would you like to explain them for us, thank you?
Yeah, go through. Again, another month where the figures are extremely low compared to previous years, not just August of 2020, but just looking at residential burglary figures. Only one recorded in the West Craven area for the whole of the month. There were only 3 the same month the previous year, which again is incredibly low, but for one in a whole month is unbelievable. Commercial burglaries, absolutely none recorded at all, which again is obviously a drop on the month of the previous year. Vehicle crime has only showed 2, that's down from 7 from August of 2020. Hate crime, 1 incident was recorded. Assaults only recorded 9 in the whole month, which was half of the August 2020 figures. And theft down at only 4 for the month again, which is 1 down on a particularly low figure from last year anyway. The only rise that we've shown in the figures that we detail here is criminal damage. There are only 10 incidents recorded, but that is up 6 from August of 2020, which is a concerning increase, although when you look at the numbers themselves, it is a small amount. Potentially that's a blip rather than a pattern. I think we would have to look at the next month's figures to make sure that those don't stay in and around that sort of increase. In relation to all crime, we've only had 61 incidents of crime reported in West Craven for the whole of the month, which is 16 down from last year. And antisocial behaviour continues to drop. Only 27 incidents recorded, which is 40 down from August of 2020. I think in general those figures are incredibly low for an area of this size, this sort of population, and although everybody will have individual incidents and crimes that they probably want to discuss now, I think overall as a number those figures are pretty good really, and I think it's a good representation of the area itself.
Any questions, Councillor?
Yes, I have, Chairman. I'm delighted to see Tim here this evening. I think he may be making an announcement, which means we won't be here at future meetings. I bet Tim would like to say that, you know, when he came in to his post as the local sergeant, that you know, crime was twice as high, and he's leaving it on a low. But whether he could take sole credit for that, I don't know. But wish him well for the future. The 3 issues that I've got, Chairman, and 2 of them really a process rather than the actuality of the crime as such. First of all, Ken Hartley, former borough councillor, sitting town councillor, reported being overtaken by a van as it was travelling through Salterford on Kellbrook Road, and he got the registration number and reported it, and yesterday or today he got an email saying, well, I mean, I paraphrase, I could look it up but I've got my own glasses on, so I'll struggle to read it, so I'll have to paraphrase a bit, but effectively it said, well, we, you know, as a constabulary we don't sort of investigate these speeding issues, and if you wish to report a speeding issue, go on the Lancashire Road Safety Partnership website and put it in then. Now, Ken is very upset about this. he had an eyewitness to this van overtaken in a dangerous way. I'm not going to say it went on the wrong side of the traffic island, but I suspect it did. And he got the registration number and passed all those on to the police. He expected some sort of proper investigation, not to be fobbed off with, well, report a speeding issue on a website. And just linked to that, this morning, the former mayoress, Councillor Jane Mills, said, well, further to Ken's report, she was overtaken in a dangerous fashion on Skipton Road, and Skipton Road, Barnoldswick, that is, and she just felt, well, what's the point of reporting it? Because, judging by Ken's experience, nothing's going to be done. It's all to go to a website. So that's the first one. The second one I'm even more concerned about. I had cause to report some criminal damage down at Victory Park. And I reported it online. Leanne picked it up and asked if there was any CCTV. I'd already alerted the clerk at Barnoldswick Town Council to the fact that there'd been this criminal damage and that it might well have been picked up on CCTV. Joe contacted the hub at Blackburn and said it was between such and such an hour and such an hour, please can you have a look? The response from the hub was, well, it's been reported to the police, therefore we won't look until the police come and ask us. So eventually Leanne, the local police officer, that's the correct terminology now, isn't it? Local policing officer?
Neighbourhood policing officer.
Neighbourhood policing officer. She contacted the hub and said, well, can you have a look and if there is anything? And the hub said to her, yes, it's captured part of the incident and it's available for you to look at. And then, this is by email, she says, well, I'll have to find time to go to Blackburn. I said, well, what do you mean go to Blackburn? We've got a police station over there that's got a monitoring station. And, all you need to do is look at the footage and the hub will be able to tell you exactly when to look. She says, oh, well, we're not allowed to do that now. And I am absolutely gobsmacked that we paid a fortune as a community, as the town council, as Pendle council, into putting in a system that could be locally monitored, as well as the monitoring station over the road at the police station here. There should be the same in Nelson. And now we're being told that local officers are having to waste time driving to Blackburn so that they can look at footage of incidents that have taken place in West Craven. And I think this is absolutely diabolical. I'm not clear whether it's a constabulary thing, whether it's a hub thing at Blackburn, but whoever has come up with this absolutely stupid system of wasting police officers' time in this fashion and not having as effective a service needs a kick up the backside and it needs putting right. I don't know whether Tim can comment on that. He may be aware of the protocols, but it needs changing. So when we get to the end of this bit, I'll be putting forward a resolution that this committee takes it up at a higher level. And then the last issue, I could sort of pick up one or two more, but the last issue is there seem to be some public order issues in Barnoldswick yesterday evening, and I'm not wanting to know the detail of that, but is that an issue that we need to be concerned about as something that's going to be a continuing problem? And I believe it was to some extent it was young people, teenagers involved, and we had some problems a couple of years ago with different groups having an altercation, and I'm just a bit fearful that we might be getting into that sort of pattern. So, 3 issues there to Tim.
Yes, I've done a bit of digging on the CCTV issue, and I think I can answer your question now. This is from the manager at the hub. The CCTV issue for the what you were talking about at Victory Park, we've managed to get that, and I have had a look at it, and I can discuss that with you. But in relation to the viewing of it, what they tell us is that a lot of the issues are down to the data management. We can be trained on the use of the system, but it is due to be changed soon. So that is a possibility once the system is changed. There's no point being trained on it now, because the system or the software or however it is downloaded is going to be changed. What they have done is there is a police officer from Blackburn permanently attached to the hub now, who would be our point of contact. We would ask them to locate and identify the footage that we were after. Then they can upload it to a system called NICE, which is how we deal with moving images, if you will, for our files, and as everything is nowadays, there's video and CCTV of everything. So we wouldn't have to go to Blackburn to view it. The police officer there would obtain whatever footage we required, upload it to our system, and then we could view it on our system in the police station, at any police station. But there is the possibility that we can be trained on the system here once it's been upgraded or they've changed the system. But apparently the issue is down to data management, which is a huge problem for constabulary and organisations. It is how we maintain, how we store and monitor and use that CCTV footage. So that's the answer I was given.
Okay.
So it looks positive.
I'm grateful to Tim for actually taking the trouble to look into this. Obviously, Leanne tipped him off that I was going to be on the warpath. I think, Chairman, I would still put forward a resolution that we try and get to grips with it, and looking at the Chairman of Van Olswick Town Council, given that in Van Olswick it's a Town Council system, the Town Council needs to be looking at it. And as far as Earby is concerned, Earby Town Council also needs to be looking at how the system is used, because we paid extra money to make sure that there could be local access to footage, so that officers made the best use of the time.
Okay.
I think just in relation to that as well, this might be an ideal time to have a look at the location of the cameras, and I know that might not be anything that's easy to change, but looking at the Victory Park one today, the way it pans and goes to about 8 or 10 different locations, where the container was, where your containers were damaged, it was nearly 3 minutes to pan round to that. So I'm just wondering whether, rather than trying to capture everything, between yourselves and the local team, those can be reset to more suitable locations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No?
Ken and his vehicle overtaken.
Yeah. It has been a bit of an issue for us, that. What we've started doing, although I'm not fully aware of the policy, but I think the main issue with reports of speeding, first of all, is how is that corroborated? As a police officer, if I detect a vehicle speeding, I have to have that corroborated either with some kind of device or a calibrated speedometer in a vehicle, evidenced over a definitive period of time or a distance away. Then that evidence can be brought before a court. So the evidence of a non-expert witness without any corroboration would never likely to be go to court. That would be the issue. Dash cams seem to be the most popular thing nowadays in cars. And what we will do, I do know, is for dangerous driving, we would certainly take dash cam evidence along with a registration number if that was available. Well, we'd have to have the registration number available, and we would potentially prosecute, and they have to take every incident on its own merits, but we would potentially prosecute from dash cam evidence, and that could be taken to court, and I know those have been taken to court in the past, as long as that can be, as long as that information and evidence can be corroborated by a witness who reports it with the dash cam, we could definitely take that forward. But just on the evidence of an eyewitness or two eyewitnesses, uncorroborated speed, without any independent witnesses, it would be very difficult to get that before a court, unfortunately.
Councillor Purcell?
Yes, mine's again, it's speeding. Last week at Gisborne Road roundabout, we pulled up at the roundabout, waited for the traffic to come down, and which was in order. Then all of a sudden, this speedo comes straight out and overtook us at the roundabout. It nearly caused a 3-car pile-up. So luckily, we carried on, and it was in front of the traffic lights there. I did manage to get the name of the car, but it's like you've said before, you've got to have all proof of it, speed and everything. But there were witnesses saw what had happened. Last night we had another incident. We had a fast car overtook us just outside Langroyd. How he didn't crash that car, I don't know. But it's your night time where they're coming out, and this was unnecessary. It would have. I mean, we've got children back at school now. And it's not good enough. I mean, we've seen this, we see Gisborne Road, Skipton Road, this road, racing, overtaking, you keep to the limit, but oh no, we have to put his foot down. But somebody will be killed before long. But like I said with the roundabout, I've got his registration number, but it turned on here, and I said, well, we can't do anything about that.
What we've got running at the moment, PCS O'Neill Walling has currently got, and I've pushed him on this, so it would be lovely if everybody would contact him on a regular basis. He's running a POP, which is problem orientated policing, around, basically it's looking at doing some work around speeding and road safety issues across the whole of West Craven. We've done some activity day, we've struggled through the summer with absences at work and deviations, unfortunately, but as the summer is falling behind us, there's more chance now that he and the rest of the team will be able to carry out more and more activity in the West Craven area. Neil's got that as very specific activity. If there are any locations where you think speeding takes place, at specific times would be better, we will have a look at that. Slightly more difficult for us to do the speed enforcement during the hours of darkness, just because of the safety aspects. It isn't impossible, but the layout of the road has to be, we'd have to have a safe environment where we could stop a vehicle either by using a police vehicle and static speed enforcement site, or observing incidents of dangerous driving if those are repetitive at certain locations. So if you do have anything, Neil Walling's email address will be neilwalling@lancashire.police.uk. There's no PNN in the addresses anymore. And if anybody, I would urge you all to let him know that I've told you that. I will tell him as well. Because we've discussed this at length, and Neil will be doing more and more activity. We've already done some activity days where we've been down at Suff pulling vehicles. Well, that was more like commercial vehicles with VOSA, the DVSA as they're called now. That was around vehicle standards and making sure that none of the vehicles were defective. We've done those on 2 separate days now, in July and August. We've had some quite good success there. We've also run speed bit of speed enforcement at the same location, and hopefully that look to carry on in the months to come.
Okay.
Can you just, excuse me, can you just give me his email address?
Sorry,
I didn't know.
you didn't catch it. Email address.
Yeah, so it's Neil, Neil, dot Wallin, Wallin, at Lancashire dot police dot UK.
Right,
Yeah, sorry, it was just, again, just to highlight the issue of speed we've got in Barnsley. A couple of days ago, somebody posted something on Facebook about an incident that happened on Skipton Road again. You'll be aware of what happened on Skipton Road a few years ago, where the unfortunate chap had the fatal accident just outside Rolls-Royce Social Club.
Yes.
So a bit further down there, the zebra crossing, there was a chap crossing the road, and a car had stopped to allow him to cross, and another car behind that was speeding and overtook on that zebra crossing. Now, if that chap had been another 6 foot across the crossing, it would have been another fatal incident. For me, it has to be, we need to go down the route of speed cameras along the entire route of Skipton Road, because it's only a matter of time before somebody else.
I'm fully aware there was an incident in Colne, probably going back 20 years, where a child was killed in exactly those same circumstances outside Phillips Lane, Shippey, and I went to that as well, so I understand exactly where you're coming from. In relation to that location, when I say it's my favourite speed enforcement site, it works perfectly for the police. Near the entrance to Gill Church, we can set up the speed gun there, and the amount of vehicles coming over the brow towards Thornton in excess of the speed limit is incredible. I mean, if we'd have been paid on commission, I would have been a wealthy man that month. So that is one of our primary sites, not just because we get the numbers obviously there, but because of the high number of speeding vehicles and the actual speed that they come through there. We were getting in excess of 45, 50 miles an hour.
It's almost as if they get round the corner from Rolls Social Club and decide how fast can I get before I have to slow down again.
Yeah,
It's absolutely crazy and lethal.
It is one of our, but again, you know, things like that. If as a group you want to get together, get a list of sites where you think are the most not productive. What's the most important sites for yourselves, where you feel as a group that the majority of the speed offences occur, we will look to try and target those areas first, as long as they fit. We find it quite difficult to get the smaller roads because we need a decent, clear line of sight, and we also need to have that incident where vehicles are likely to exceed the speed limit, not just in short bursts.
Okay. Councillor Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Following directly on from that, and the list of sort of locations, I mean, we have in the past here brought up the major roads on several occasions. I mean, it is consistently at Skipton Road, it's this road just here, and I think down the bottom of Gisborne Road as well.
Manchester Road.
Manchester Road as well, yeah.
56 through
Yeah.
It's Kell, Saltford Road. Yeah. They're horrendous speeds. There's people every night doing excess of 70 miles an hour. Absolutely horrendous speed.
Yeah. I mean, in regards to Skipton Road and that crossing, I mean, really, I think it needs something more fundamental change in there. You know, the road is very wide, it's very straight, it's got no obstacles. There's nothing on the side of the road to give you an indication of the speed you go in, apart from your speedometer in your car. I mean, it's a road designed to make you feel that you can go faster, and I think LCC needs to do something there. Maybe narrowing the road, traffic islands, etc. Anything really, because you know, if you design your roads to go fast, people will go fast, and no amount of enforcement will stop that. I mean, maybe in the short term, but in the long term, and I mean, that road's probably not going to see a redesign in forever, as far as we're concerned, and it's people who are in danger now, isn't it?
Okay.
I do have another item, but I mean, if people want to come back in on this first.
Just
Well, then let Tom finish.
Okay.
I've had a request in from a resident concerned about the Skipton Road and Coates Lane Junction, which I think is definitely directly connected to this. And she's wanting a mirror put in place across from the Coates Lane Junction so people can see the road round the bend there. And I think we just want to pass that on to the Traffic Liaison Committee. I know in previous occasions they have turned down these such requests, but they might see it differently in light of the recent crashes.
Yeah, we'll pass that on. You want to come back, Councillor Wick?
Well, it was to do with Skipton Road. There are two interactive signs. One as you're coming out of Van Oldswick, past the junction that Tom's just referred to, which doesn't work.
Works, but
It flashes, but it doesn't. No, it doesn't work in two ways. Thank you, Mike. It doesn't work in the sense that the lights flash, but the sign that says slow down doesn't illuminate. And I must have reported that to the County Council innumerable times over the last 4 years.
So I want to chase him up as well.
And so there's that one. And then at the other end of Skipton Road, near the junction of Gill Lane and Gill Meadows, there's another sign for traffic coming into the town, which flashes, but it's not just orientated correctly, so you see the flashing lights, but it doesn't tell you to slow down. The wider issue that Councillor Whittingham pointed out is that whether they're flashing or not, and whether they're working or not, whether they have any impact on driver behaviour is debatable. Chairman, Councillor Tomwick mentioned about the mirror. I think there's a whole host of issues here, and I had it in mind to ask for an agenda item at the next meeting to pick up. I mean, another suggestion is the converting the zebra crossing to a light control
if you want to
crossing.
put that on the agenda for next time.
Well, what I was saying is if we can resolve now to put it on the agenda for next time, then we can get it looked at.
But it's okay just putting it on the agenda, but do we not need somebody here who can answer any questions to it?
Well, we've got all sorts of ideas, I mean, some of which have been articulated this evening, and you know, we can get them explored. If there's somebody from the County Council officialdom is willing to rock and discuss it with us, that would be delightful, because we've asked for those face-to-face meetings several times.
Can we put that in? Can we ask to see if somebody from County Council could come and talk to us?
I don't think they come to evening meetings.
Oh, no, then. Right.
I'm just wondering whether you might get Simon Bucknell is the guy I've always used, and I do think he lives fairly locally as well, so you might just have a chance with
Right,
him.
well, we can only ask the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
But his job's moved on from...
Any other issues for Tim? Yeah, sorry.
Just mentioning, I've had a lot of reports about youths down at Valley Gardens with drugs and lighting fires. And people around there are very concerned. I don't understand drugs, but they've got foil and matches and stuff, I don't know. So I have reported it to Neil, so hopefully they'll put it on, but I just want people to be aware of it.
Okay. Anything else for Tim? No? Well, thank you very much.
Chairman, what action are the Constabulary taking? Marjorie said she's reported it.
Sorry, that was Valley Gardens, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of what actions occurred from that. Neil's on leave now for another week and a little bit. But if you've spoken directly to, have you?
I emailed him.
Right. It might be worth just emailing him to chase that up. But if you want to add in Kevin Dolphin and Leanne Greenwood, in Neil's absence, it may be that they're doing something about it, or that they're aware of any updates. And I think if it's been done that way via email,
Yeah.
Neil may well have forgotten to update you. So maybe a gentle reminder when he gets back might be ideal.
And you'll have
Right,
a
thank
good
you.
trail of it.
Thanks.
Okay, well thank you very much for coming, Tim. I'll let you go.
Thank you. And just to let everybody know, this will be my last meeting. I retire in 7 months, but I'm actually moving on to a bit of a project at the moment, which is due up for court soon, so that's taking my time. I will be replaced by Stuart Banks, as I said to David before. Other than a bit of a beard and a moustache, he looks very, very similar to me. So you've got a fairly one-for-one replacement there. He's an experienced officer, he's 29 years service, he retires in another year. He's plenty of policing experience across the board, but he previously was the Neighbourhood Sergeant covering Ribble Valley for the last 4 or 5 years. And he's in post now, but unfortunately, as happens to us from time to time, he's been asked to cover the custody office today, so he isn't available to come to the meeting, but he does send his apologies. But I'm sure, as long as he's not covering custody or immediate response next month, he will probably come to the meeting.
Okay, well in that case, we wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you. I'm not going very far, and I'll always keep an eye out.
If you know if we're not going to see you again.
Chairman, can we formally put it on record our appreciation
Yeah,
of Tim's
absolutely.
efforts and wish him well for his court
Future
case and
retirement.
subsequent happenings, whatever they may be.
I do remember the very first meeting I came to, I think, David, and you'd said that I think you might have had a couple of sergeants in short succession, and I promised that I wasn't really going anywhere until my retirement. So although I haven't managed to get that straight up to retirement, I've come fairly close, as close as I could anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much to everybody for how you treated me. Thank you.
Bye.
Keep smiling.
Right, moving on now, planning applications, 5A. Commissioning principle, erection of 9 dwellings, land of Cobblane and Stone Trap Calrock. We did have a site visit this afternoon. Who wants to kick off on this one? Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of technical questions, actually, to start with, just to clear my head. If this planning in principle, now sort of read it through again since this afternoon, if this was to be approved, how are the technical details that would subsequently follow it different to a reserved matters or a major application such as the one that they have submitted? What are technical details? Is it more or less the same stuff and they have to cover all the same things you would expect to see in a full planning application? So there would be all the details that we're seeing in this other one that's going to no doubt come here at some point. Just to clarify the language, what are technical details as opposed to a full planning application?
I think some of it is semantics, I would
Yeah.
say. You're quite right to compare it in some ways to reserve matters. I will be critical of government here. The guidance is pathetic that we have on how we deal with those. It is contained in some subordinate legislation, permitted development order, but it is effectively those issues about drainage, about highways, about design, about proximity to listed buildings, because obviously there's a statutory requirement under section 66 of the Listed Buildings Act to look at listed buildings, etc. So you could equate it to reserved matters.
So that would be the next thing. Those reserved matters, in this particular case, they've asked for planning in principle for 9 dwellings. Would the subsequent follow-up technical details also have to be for 9 dwellings? Because it says up on the top of that page, the last page, the permission in principle can only consider the principle of development included and the amount of development. So presumably any subsequent technical details also would have to be in line with the amount of development this is actually saying, which is only for 9 dwellings.
It couldn't be beyond that because the requirement is that PIPs cannot be for major applications, so
Yeah.
you couldn't have 10,
Yeah.
for example, with this. So you could have 7 houses on there, but it's more likely to come forward the size of land for 9 units, but it can't be beyond the 9 units.
So related to this, and I mean, I know we're aware that there is another application out there, obviously that's not being discussed tonight because it's not on the agenda. But I was just wondering again, we had that site visit this afternoon, what would be the sequence if this pit was refused? I mean, to all intents and purposes, this is next to pointless, this particular application, because the subsequent reserve matters have been put in. So if this was refused, when did the original planning rights expire on that site? Because I know that, because one of the things that's been said is that this was only put in to extend those rights.
I don't think this is pointless for the applicant, but it's duplication, I think, perhaps, you may be saying. In terms of the outline permission, it expired on the 4th. I think it was issued on the 5th of September 3 years ago, and the developer has 3 years to submit the reserve matters, and then 2 years to commence from the approval, if they're approved, not preempting that, from approval of reserve matters.
So, given that they have submitted reserve matters, does that supersede the pit, or are they just considered completely separate?
Completely separate legal entities. There are entities in their own right. In fact, reserve matters aren't planning permissions, they are just approving details. The actual legal entity, shall we call it, is the outline consent.
Which has already been granted.
Which has already been granted.
Okay. What would happen if both the pit and subsequently reserve matters were to be refused?
Appeals, or not. If they weren't appealed, then the matter would rest there. If they were refused, then with any planning decision a committee makes or a council makes, applicants have a right of appeal.
Sorry, I'm being technical here, everybody else, just get it in my own head.
It's okay.
If the reserved matters, which will presumably turn up at committee within the next couple of months or so, that was refused in as much as the contents of it weren't satisfactory to committee, and the PIP essentially could still be a fallback. They could still subsequent, if that was approved, they could still submit technical details on the basis of the PIP. So they could almost have dual running applications on the same site, which would sort of overlap each other as they're going along. They could have this PIP could be approved, then they just ignore it for a bit of pieces. How long does the PIP last before they have to put technical details in?
I think it's 3 years.
So there's plenty of time. So they could feasibly, we could argue the toss about reserve matters, and at the same time they could think, oh well, I'll still carry on doing technical details for this one as well. So they could actually just go down these 2 lines.
So there are a number of permutations, Chairman, depending on what order would be approved or not.
No, I appreciate it's all a little bit hypothetical at the moment, but it's useful to have an idea of what the understanding is for this. The last question then, just quickly for me then, is we talked briefly this afternoon about the neighbourhood plan, and I did check, and I can confirm that the neighbourhood plan is being ready for consultation, and the first consultation is next Saturday, so that's when formally it will start. What's the status of the neighbourhood plan for Kell, Brook in relation to either this or any other application on that land when it comes to committee?
The view I would take, once it's been submitted for examination as opposed to the Regulation 14, Regulation 14 really hasn't got much status because we don't know what the local authority, and we don't know what developers, members of the public, etc. will say. Once it gets to where it's been submitted, the weight attached to the policies really depends on the weight of objections to them. If you have policies, for example, which are objected to, you will give them little weight because it will be for an examiner really then to make their decision on whether it meets the basic conditions and take that forward, and you'd expect to give more weight were an inspector's report to be favourable for adoption. Plans that are not adopted, you can never give them full weight. You don't have the status of being the development plan. So quite often you're looking at issues of prematurity. Would a development prejudice the implementation of a plan? And you've got to look at that as well. So regulation 14, the plan may or may not change from there. We don't know what's going to happen. So we'll give it very little weight, or you give it no weight until such time as the final plan was issued. Once comments have been received on that, then you would start to give the emerging policies more weight, particularly if they didn't have any objections to them.
So it could be the situation that as this Kell and self-neighbourhood plan goes through consultation, if there are very few objections to the substance of it, then it gains weight as...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I would say you would only give it, well, you would only give it anywhere near substantial weight or a greater weight at the next stage once the final plan has been put in place and then that's submitted for examination.
Okay, I think that's all my technical
Okay.
stuff for now, thank you.
On that issue, Neil, if they did manage to get all the plan done and do all the whatever it has to go through, and then the next application for the reserve matters comes up, would it have any bearing on it? Would it have some weight?
Well, it would do, Chairman, were it to have gone through this stage and it reaches the next one. So by the time reserve matters gets here, no. Besides which, you've got to remember reserve matters doesn't look at the principle, so approving or not details. But I mean, my clear advice is that at this stage, the neighbourhood plan should not be given any weight in looking at this application at this stage of this PIP.
Okay. Councillor Wynne?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this is the third time that we've discussed this as committee, and I hoped in moving the deferral at the last meeting that we could have had sort of like buy one get one free by. I mean, I'm not saying I was going to say bog off. But I thought that could be misconstrued by the developer. So, you know, we had expected that the reserve matters application for the same plot of land might have come to this meeting so that the site visit would have covered both aspects.
It hasn't, so.
But, I mean, the developer clearly is carrying out a twin track approach and running two horses in the same field. I come back to what Parish Councillor Gary Wilson was saying 3 meetings ago, is given the circumstances that we've now got, but surely this is an example of where we should decline to determine. I mean, I think the reserve matters application stands on its merits. There may be reasons why we're content with it or we're not content with it. There might be design issues that we're unhappy with, or you know, some of the details that we're unhappy with. But surely that's really what the developers want. They want to have the reserve matters determined for 10 dwellings. And I'm not going to say that this is a ruse to sort of keep things alive, but really, it is. It's a device. So my first reaction is to propose that we should decline to determine this one. Let's have the reserve matters. Let's have a look at the real application rather than this sort of shadow permission in principle that nobody really knows what it is, and all very unsatisfactory, and you know. So
if it does get declined, it will go to B no.
Well, I mean, I mean that's my feeling on it. That's what I would propose.
Very good, Chairman. If I just get clarification from Councillor Witt, are you saying decline in the sense that me and Gary had a discussion, shall we say, about that, didn't we? Decline to determine it lawfully. We did look at that with Mr Wilson afterwards and Howard Culture, Head of Legal Services, and Gary did accept that I think his words were misread the legislation, so we can't actually
yes,
do that.
But Chairman, Gary's proposition was based on, I can't remember the clause, but there was another clause which clearly referred to when you've got two applications on the table for the same plot of land, you know, which are clearly the same, and I mean, these are not exactly the same, but, and I'm paraphrasing again, but circumstances have changed in the 3 months because we now have the application for the reserved matters. In those circumstances, it's a different clause of the legislation which allows us to decline to determine.
Well, I'll ask Mr Watson to come back on this.
In section 70 and 78, Chair, we looked at them in quite some detail. Effectively, you can only decline in circumstances where there is a right of appeal or there's a decision in play that can be appealed. Now, we haven't got that here because it's quite several caveats towards the legislation. So, in a situation where, for example, someone's refused and there's a right of appeal against that, then a second application can be declined to be determined. Doesn't stop a developer with a consent in place, with no right of appeal against that, as in this case. In fact, technically it's expired, from putting a second application in on the land within the 3rd of the worth. So Mr Wilson did accept in the end that he misread what constitutes an application.
Parish Councillor Gary Wilson, I've had a conversation with him since, and you know, he's very clearly of the view that another clause within that section of the legislation would come into play in the circumstances that we've now got. So I mean, I just put that on the table, and you know, I hear what Mr Watson's saying.
Yeah, Councillor Tamlin.
Thanks, Chair. Just to confirm with Neil on this, so are you saying that a developer for a particular site can have, what's the, obviously we've got two in tandem here, and applications for the same sites. Can it go up to 3, 4?
Yeah, the legislation's put in place to stop people appealing and then having, for want of a better phrase, a stalking horse. It wasn't to prevent a developer who may have a planning application on one site for something, then putting something else in on there to try and vary their application, or to put a greater number or lesser number. So the legislation is specifically to stop developers there who have rights and appeal, and then keep bashing away at the planning system when they've had decisions made upon that appeal. For example, if you've had a refusal for a similar application, you can't submit something for 2 years. But one, there's never been a refusal on here, so an appeal has never been dismissed, so that doesn't apply. And 2, would be outside of any 6 months appeal period or a 2 year from a decision anyway, because we're 3 years into it. So I'm very clear, and the advice from Mr Colshaw is very clear. There are no circumstances legally that we can lawfully decline to determine this application.
As much as we don't want to approve this, I can quite agree we don't have any grounds. Has anybody got anything else? What do you want to do with this committee? Councillor Dalforth.
I'm not certain what we're trying to do here. Are we trying to get rid of this planning application? Are we trying to refuse it? Because of exactly what David has said, that there's 2 applications going at one go and it's a bit iffy and so on. They've already had appeal planning on this site. We fought it tooth and nail and went through it in considerable amount of time and detail. I remember Gary at the time involving himself quite dramatically in it, and we went through that route and they won on appeal. Are we saying we should refuse this because there's 2 applications running in tandem, or are we saying we refuse it because we don't like the development? I just find the logic of it somewhat difficult to grasp at the minute. because all we're going to do is push it back up to policy and resource.
Exactly, you're just in a...
How it goes through there, who knows? And then it will go, no doubt, to appeal. And they've already won an appeal on a development on this site, given it might be slightly different numbers. So we're standing it up to fail, surely, are we not?
Yeah.
So the whole purpose is going to give developers fair cracks at the whip as well as the local community. I fully understand, more than understand, that the community doesn't want this development. But in some respect, that's not the point here. It's one of the planning merits behind this. The developer should get a decision. If we can't, as an authority, there's nothing to prevent that in terms of a material consideration, and there's case history behind it in terms of appeals, then we need to give developers a proper decision, a fair crack of the whip with that. And we are charged as an authority with being a responsible body making responsible decisions.
Okay, Councillor Webb.
I think part of my difficulty with this is, Neil says we've got to take into account material considerations, but we haven't got any detail. There's nothing at all about the development. So as a matter of, I'll use the word principle, I am very much loath to give permission in principle. It goes against the grain. I would much rather we have solid plans on the table, everybody can see what the impact is, and all the implications, or as many of the implications you can foresee, and you make a decision on it. And here we have a red line on a piece of paper, or in a virtual universe, and that's it. Nothing. The outline consent that was granted on this land has expired. Well, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a blank sheet of paper, and the permission in principle is a blank sheet of paper with a red line in it. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not voting for it.
Councillor Meston.
Pretty much I was going to say most of that, and I think it just come back to the question you asked, what are the planning merits of this? And I think on the basis of what we just heard from Councillor Wood, and I was going to argue much the same, I don't think there are any planning merits for this. I think what has been subsequently submitted, and we know it's out there, I know it's not discussed tonight, but that is a plan. It's got loads of details, and it will be discussed on its merits, and it will be put to the committee, and it will be challenged, and it will be argued about, and there will be a decision made based on something we can actually discuss. This is discussing fresh air, and you do get the feeling that they're playing it, and they're playing the system. And I know if we're going to say that being a responsible council is right and proper, and we should give the developers the crack of the whip, well, they got their crack of the whip, and it's going to turn up next month or the month after. That's the crack of the whip. This is just messing us around, and there's nothing. There's no planning merits in this, and there's nothing that's going to add anything to the planning discussion. All it is stringing it out. So I think on those arguments, I would want to move to refuse this as well on that basis.
So are you moving that we refuse it?
I'll let any further discussion take place first.
Councillor Knight.
Sorry, a question for Neil, that's more than anything else, just because it's frying my brain with this prick pin. If I use the analogy of applying for a mortgage, and you apply for a mortgage for £100,000 and you get approved in principle, that's similar situation to what we're looking for here. Is that right? So that after you get your approval in principle, you have to submit all your evidence of your wages and your outgoings and stuff like that.
I've never heard it discussed that way, yes.
Just the way my brain works.
Quite
So
simple, like
at this stage, it would be a case of looking at that individual thing and going, is it likely that it could go ahead and then get a little technical stuff behind it?
And through you, Chairman, it's exactly that. And how you come to that decision is by looking at the national planning policy situation and the development plan for the area, and then you come to a decision on the merits of what's before you. Now, with a full application, you get into a lot more details and an outline. There are certain different parameters, but fundamentally, you go back to the development plan. And the development plan, was it different in 2018, 17-18, when the appeals were there, wasn't. It was the NPPF different, no it wasn't. So the principle was then set by the inspector approving it in outline. Professionally, I don't like PIPs because I don't think they give enough detail, but the law is saying people can put PIPs in. Whether they like them or not, they can put PIPs in.
So essentially, if we approve this, we can still reject the technical stage
because that's technical consent or not there, but there's a still extant because the reserve matters keeps the outline in play now. That established the principle of it, and the PIP is saying, can we re-establish that? Now, if an inspectors with the same planning policies has said, yes we can, it's really difficult for them to be whether or not the developer, the reason they put it is absolutely relevant. And they're not, excuse my paraphrase, we're not messing about. They put an application, a legal entity, and we've got to determine as an authority.
Okay, so what do you want to do, committee? Do you want to move?
Yeah,
you move that we
I'll
refuse.
for those reasons, and I think it's fair comment. Everything that's been said, that it is, they have a right to do that. But actually, my sense is that they're taking the system and the committee for mugs, and I think that's not within the.
I don't think you can say that.
I don't get a vote, do I? So so well, I think it's worth that vote. So I'll move.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I would second that, Chairman.
Yep.
I mean, my original proposition about declining to determine hasn't been seconded, so I would second refusal.
Okay.
Chairman, I need to jump in here. Before I wanted to say, I think on that basis there is a significant risk of costs against the council because the grounds are not planning grounds. So it would stand referred to the head of legal services, and then if he agrees to pay.
Okay, so everybody clear on that? Okay, so all those in favour of refusal, please show. That is unanimous. Okay, that's refused.
So it's not extra first.
Oh, sorry, that's wishful thinking. I'm afraid. Is it next Thursday?
Without getting on in time, that's right.
Yeah, probably go to the next policy on the 16th. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Change of use from former children's nursery to storage unit at Gisborne Road Nursery School, Gisborne Road, Garlick. Who wants to start on this one? Don't all speak at once. Come, time's marching on. Need to go. Yeah, Councillor Tomlin.
Thanks, Chairman. I don't in principle have any problems with this. No, if there's no sort of demand for the size to use now and there is for what it wants to be, then so do it.
So are you moving we approve it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a seconder. Yeah.
Yeah, Chairman, just to comment, I mean, the old nursery building, and I hate to think how many years ago it was, but I attended school, one of my years at primary school, in that unit. At the time, it was a temporary building, and well,
it certainly needs doing up then now, doesn't it? After
well,
all them years.
it had become dilapidated whilst it was still the nursery. Well, it was still in the ownership of Lancashire County Council, and obviously they sold it off. And it's no fault of the current owners that it looked a mess, but it would be good if the new use could lead to it being more visually appealing, I think.
Okay, so
Jim, just one, if you spot the deliberate mistake in there, just to test people reading it, conditions 3 and 4 are mirror images of each other, so could we remove one of those, please?
yeah, of course you can. Okay, so all those in favour of this application? Yeah. That's unanimous. Okay, okay. Right, let's move on. Appeals. Appeal against refusal. 129 dwellings, just note that. Yeah.
If I can ask a question, Chairman, at the last Policy Resources Committee, we had the application for the land off Foster Road for 67, and Catherine Hughes sort of beat about the bush a bit and avoided answering the questions that were asked. But how does this appeal decision affect the 5-year housing land supply? And if you want to beat about the bush, that's fine.
I won't beat about the bush. The formal figures aren't out yet, but we have completed 289 units this year, and the 5-year supply calculations based on the standard methodology of 140. I haven't got the exact figures, but we will have a 5-year supply.
Excellent, very good. Right.
Okay. Yes, Councillor.
Just very quickly, Neil, does this decision stop the developer from coming back with another application for the site? I mean, I know at the time we were saying, you know, in principle we're okay with development on the brownfield and part of the greenfield, and it's just the floodplain area which they're very sort of blatantly filled with houses, and we said no thanks. But can they come back with a more proper?
They can. There's no pressure of public use.
It is being web streamed.
In which case, I'll brief you afterwards because I've had a conversation
Yep.
with them, but there's no plans yet.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Enforcement action 6. Anything on this? Just note it. Yep. Item 7, capital programme. We've got 3 bids in. We'll deal with individually. Go for the Barlick Town Council one, installation of outdoor gyms. What do you want to do with this one? Don't all speak at once.
You do.
I'll go on then, if Mike as the chairman I want to. On the Barlick Town Council bid, as a town council we put in £10,000 to erect some outdoor gym equipment in all the 3 parks in Barnoldswick, and we were looking for match funding of that from this area committee, as well as we're going to apply for other funding sources as well, to potentially get up to nearly £30,000 for sort of an equitable distribution around all the parks. I think there's a bit of an issue really in the funding, in that all the parks do have users from all over the town, from Barnoldswick ward and the Courts area, in the Courts and Earby ward, and so the distribution of where this money comes from for that might just be a bit complicated.
Just on that score, Chairman, my understanding is that the Victory Park equipment would be literally on the boundary between the Barnoldswick ward and the Earby Courts ward. So I hear what Councillor Tomwick is saying, in the sense that there should perhaps be some money allocated from the Barnoldswick ward, but equally there should be a lesser amount of money allocated from the Earby Courts ward funding. At the first meeting of this committee, I suggested a protocol in terms of how the funding should be distributed to each township and village, so that there was equitable funding for Salford and Kell and stuff, and for the courts part of Earby and Courts ward, as well as Earby itself. So I haven't got the figures with me, but I think it would be sensible to allocate something in the order from the Abbey Courts ward allocation of say 1,500, which is less than the courts part of the Abbey Courts ward is due if you look at it on a population basis.
Well, that isn't the case. What we need to establish is, do we want to give them this £10,000, and if so, is it going to come from the Barnholdswick councillors or is it going to come from us all?
Well, it comes from the committee. It's a committee decision.
If it's on the boundary, I personally think it should come from the Barnholdswick councillors.
No,
Yeah.
there's Courts ward, the people who live in Courts. I'm shocked that you're suggesting that the people who live in the Courts part of the Abbey Courts ward should not receive any allocation from the Abbey Courts funding that this area committee has. At the last meeting, you forced through a decision that split it 50-50 between the two wards. Now, the Barnholdswick ward is slightly bigger. I'm not arguing I represent Abbey Courts. But the people who live in Courts part of Abbey Courts deserve that resource and that funding just as much as people in Salterford, Kelbrook and Suff and Abbey. So if you're saying, well, no, there should be no funding for the folk who live in Courts, I think
We're not saying
that's
that at all.
well, it's right, you've just said that.
No, we're not. It isn't in the Courts
You've
ward.
just said,
You have told
you've just said it has to come.
Councillor
You've just said it has to come from the Barnholdswick ward
Councillor Wick,
allocation.
this is in the Barnholdswick ward. You've just told me that. It's in Victory Park.
Yes, and Victory Park, the boundary between the wards goes through Victory Park, and the proposed equipment would be on that boundary.
In that boundary. Right, well, what does committee want to do with this one?
Well, I am proposing that of the £10,000 that is requested, that 1,500 is allocated from the Abbey Courts allocation.
Councillor Whip's got £6,000, he can put it under that.
This committee has got £33,000 or whatever.
I thought we decided at the last meeting how it was going to be done.
Yeah, and it's the decisions are by committee. And we had a discussion about this, and the chairman assured us she actually rejected a formal proposal, and she assured
We're
us
not going over
she assured us
ground.
that the decisions would be made by
Councillor Wick,
committee.
we are
We haven't
not
got,
going over
we haven't
ground.
got, I haven't got, you haven't got £6,000. This committee has got £30,000 of public money to distribute equitably and fairly across the residents of West Craven. And that is what we should be doing. And if you're saying, well, you can't allocate any of the Abbey and Courts money for the Courts part of Abbey and Courts, well, that is shameful.
It's not in Courts. Right.
And it should come from the Abbey and Courts pot. It's not divided in the report into the £6,000 for Rosemary Carroll, £6,000 for Mike Goldthorpe, £6,000 from Jennifer Purcell. It's the money is for the committee.
Right, what do we want to do with this committee?
I think you've already decided, unless you're going to change the resolution that we had at the...
We're not going to change the resolution.
So are you two saying that you're not going to support Courts Ward resolution?
Of course we're going to support Courts Ward, but
Right,
this
well,
is not in
I
Courts
propose-
Ward.
Are you saying you're not going to support
I'm proposing £1,500 from the Abbey Courts allocation, which is actually lower than it's due, but there might be something else comes a little bit later in the year.
You can do that, Councillor Wick, if you want, and that'll come out of your share.
No, it comes out of the pot.
No.
I'm sorry, but I'm not having that.
Well, I'm
No.
sorry, but that's not happening.
No, because you'll throw it in my face later on. You'll say, oh, well, that David Whip gave £1,500 to Courts Ward.
Councillor Wick,
And it is depriving Salterford or it is depriving Calvert and
the
Suff.
type of thing you would do.
No,
Not
this
us.
is the sort of thing that you are doing.
No, well, look.
grouped upon.
We're not...
£1,500 from the Amy Courts
Councillor
allocation.
Wynne has put a proposal on the table that this money comes out of the total pot.
I've put a proposal that £1,500
Comes from the Amy pot.
£1,500 comes from the Amy Courts pot.
And the rest comes out of...
No, I'm just talking about allocating it. You know.
No, well, we're talking about £10,000.
Yes, and I'm suggesting that of the Amy Courts allocation, which is 50% of the whole, that we allocate £1,500 towards this project.
And more about the rest of it that they've asked
Look,
for.
I'm just talking about the
Well, we're
Amy
talking
Courts funding.
about it all, the £10,000. So, all you want...
It's not
you
up to
don't want-
me.
You don't want to give
Chairman,
£10,000.
I'll move that we support the full amount.
No, wait until we've determined the 1,500 for Amy Courts.
Well, we can't, because the amount is £10,000 that they're asking for. So we're either allocating £10,000 or we're not.
Or it might be a lesser amount.
Can we have some figures? There's been no figures bandied about.
There's a figure on the page,
Of
And-
£10,000.
and there is a match funding of £10,000. It's all in the report,
Is there a
right in
breakdown?
front of
Can
you.
we get a breakdown?
£10,000 from the Town Council, supposed £10,000 from this committee.
So it's going to cost £20,000.
Well, it's going to cost more than that. But we're just asking for match funding from what the Town Council is putting up on its money. But we're also going to be applying for more funding sources.
Right. But from this committee, you're asking for £10,000.
Yes.
Right, okay. And Councillor Wick's suggestion is that £1,500 comes out of the Avian Courts budget and the rest comes out of the Barnoldswick budget.
I'm just proposing the
Well,
Amy
you
Courts
can't.
bit. No, it's
If we
up to
did
the
that,
Barnoldswick
then-
councillors.
So we need an answer off the Barnoldswick councillors. Or
Well,
you
determine
want
the
to put rest-
1,500 and they'll be able
No,
to make
we're
a decision.
determining the whole £10,000.
Look, I'm not
No.
proposing something to allocate money within the Bonaldswick ward. I'm
Well, then what
proposing
is-
something
what-
to allocate
Councillor
funding
Wick.
within the Abbey Courts ward.
What are the other three Barnoldswick councillors? What do they feel about this? Yes, councillor.
I'm quite willing for it to go through.
Right, from your share. Councillor Purcell?
No.
No. Councillor Tomwick?
Yeah, but I think it needs to be, a fair equity distribution between all the councillors, because it's not, it's not my money, it's not Marge's money, it's not Jennifer Purcell's money, it's the committee's money.
Yes.
And it needs to be, equal distribution from that dishing out.
Well, you haven't got agreement with the other councillors for this.
Well, Chairman, I am proposing £1,500 from the Abbey Courts share of the allocation within the area committee.
Right.
I move.
Right, so have you got a seconder?
I'll second that.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go to the vote on that £1,500 comes out of the Abbey and Courts allocation towards this project. All those in favour? All those against?
Shameful.
Right.
Absolutely shameful.
Can I just say, this is exactly what Mike Whittingham said. Sorry, apologies. Mike Goldthorpe said at the last meeting would stop happening because of the way that you set up this.
Look,
No, it
And
won't.
it's,
No, it
this
won't.
is exactly what is happening now, and it's never happened in the past.
Look, you and I both know it's a man trap, so just
Yeah.
leave it where it is.
I'll
Okay.
move that the Bonoldic allocation will fit the £8,500 section of this.
And is that coming for the three Barnoldswick councillors?
Yes.
You want to share that?
Yeah.
It's out of the
Yeah.
area committee's money.
No, it's out of the three Barnoldswick councillors' money.
No. It's not,
No, Councillor
it's not
Purcell
personal
doesn't want
money.
that.
It's
No.
public money.
We know it's public.
It's not my
money.
fault, it's not Marge's fault,
Right,
it's not
so
Jennifer's fault.
are both the Barnoldswick councillors willing to put in, what did you say, £4,500 each? What do you want,
No.
6.5?
No, it's out of the
Sorry.
Bonaldswick ward share.
6,800. Sorry.
8,500 from the Bonaldswick allocation.
No, it'll come out of
The Barnoldswick allocation.
Barnoldswick allocation.
No, the two Barnoldswick councils.
No, there isn't anything in this report that says
There
there
is.
is money for each individual council. This is corrupt.
No, it is not corrupt.
It is corrupt.
Well, look, the motion is on the table. It comes out of two Barnoldswick councillors because the third Barnoldswick councillor doesn't want to do it. Or it
Excuse me,
doesn't
Chair.
go ahead at all.
Sorry, can I just say something? I've been sitting
Yeah.
listening to this, and I must say that the ethical boundaries are being drawn by talking about individual councillors having a set pot of money.
Yes.
You are absolutely drawing a really grey line across ethical boundaries. You need to be really, really careful about how we discuss and operate with money.
Absolutely.
There is several wards within West Craven,
Yes.
and each of them wards have been awarded or have been granted a set of money. We need to discuss this as, will Barnoldswick ward offer a certain amount of money, not will particular councillors offer a certain amount of money. That is ethically wrong.
But that's not what we agreed at the last
That's what you've just said.
Yeah, we didn't agree that last meeting. So, we go back to the original point. Are the two Barnoldswick councillors willing to put in 4,258?
Chair, again, it's not the
No.
two Barnoldswick councillors' money.
It is. It's all three.
It is not the
It's
personal
their
money of each individual councillor.
We know it's not the personal.
That's what you're
council
saying it
with.
is, though.
No, I'm not. What we're saying is it's their decision how they choose to spend it in their wards
No.
for the people.
You said very
of
clearly.
Barnoldswick.
You said very clearly at the last
Oh, we
committee
don't-
that it would be committee decisions. It is committee funding. The reports are written in the way of there's so much for Barnoldswick Ward, there's so much for Avey Coates Ward. It's not so much for Rosemary Carroll, so much for Mark Goldthorpe, so much for
Been over
Jennifer
this.
Purcell.
But the Barnoldswick councillors, all three Barnoldswick councillors, are entitled to their say and how they choose to spend their share of the money.
But you
In
are
the
riding
ward.
roughshod.
I am not riding roughshod over anybody. That's what you tend to do.
No, you
No,
have just voted down
I'm
a fair and
moving
equitable
council
share
I am
coming to the
moving
Coates
on.
Ward residents.
I am moving on. I will say it one last time. Do the Barnoldswick councillors want this money to come out of their share?
I have moved that £8,500 be allocated from the Barnoldswick ward share of the total area committee allocation from the capital programme.
And got a second, Roger?
I'll second
Yeah,
that, Chairman.
Thank you. All those in favour, please show. All those against?
Shameful.
That's lost. Right, moving on.
Shameful.
The next bid is St Peter's Community Garden near there. They're after £100.
Move that we approve that from the Avey Coates Ward allocation.
From all three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, all those in favour? Yeah, anyone against? No. Right, that's moved. The next one, Saltford Village Hall furniture upgrade. They're asking for £1,000.
I've moved that we approve £1,000 from the Avey Coates Ward allocation.
It could be between the three of us, yeah?
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
agree? Thank you. That's right, moving on. Highways issues, number 8, Myrtle Grove. Have we got any updates on this one?
Chair, I think the meeting has been arranged.
Right, did committee all hear that? Scott Wallis saying a report will come back to the next meeting. Are we happy with that?
Yeah,
Just note that then. Yeah, okay. Item 9, environmental blight. Anything on this one? No, shall we just note it? Yep. Okay, item 10. Barleycorn Neighbourhood Town Centres. Have we got any updates on this one?
I'll let you go ahead.
I'm probably going to say what you will, Councillor. There have been meetings, there are proposals in place to have some street furniture and a development of a website, and that work is ongoing. I have asked Mike Williams to bring the full report next time, we'll look at the funding across the board, because there's still quite a bit to spend across Pendle. It is a Pendle plot, so work is progressing, I think, quite well.
It is. We did have a walk. I can only speak for everybody. We did have a walk around here to decide what we wanted, etc., etc. Mainly a lot of painting of benches and street furniture on that one. Has anybody got anything else? Yeah, Councillor.
Yeah, I've discussed with engineers at Pendle about the works that we've requested for Barnells with the planters, etc. And that's underway. The staging which we'd agreed to have for the town square in Bonalswick has been sourced, and I think Mike Williams is on with ordering that now.
Yeah, it's up to costings, didn't it, today or the day before?
Yeah. And I think that's all.
Okay. Councillor David Brook.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the street furniture painting in Avey, there was a certain part of it that we thought we could afford through this funding, but then there's that many bollards and planters and poly planters and benches that we said we needed to get the county council to redo the street lighting columns,
Yeah.
which are their responsibility, and we were hopeful that the town council would pick up some of the right roadside seats and maybe some of the other stuff, so we could have a comprehensive improvement of the streets in here. Could I ask, and I don't know whether Neil is aware of this, but can I ask if there's been any progress with those other elements of the scheme?
John, I didn't discuss that level of detail with Mike. I discussed the programme today. I can get back to you on that.
Okay, so, I mean, I
We're
think...
going to get a better report next month.
Yeah,
Probably will.
but we don't want to lose sight of
No.
those other elements on that.
No. Okay.
In terms of website, I think, Chairman, you indicated that Avey Town Council weren't really interested.
No, they're not, to be perfectly honest. I haven't got a formal reply from them yet, so we'll just wait till next month, till we get a
Alright.
better report.
As far as Barnoldswick's concerned, I know that the Town Council had some informal discussion. I can't remember, I'm just glancing towards Mike. I think it was sort of left in a bit of a vein, because these things are easy enough to set up, and you get funding, you get it set up. It's the future
Yeah.
maintenance and management of it that's the issue, and I'm not sure that there's a commitment from Barnoldswick Town Council. So we need to get that before we can...
Yeah, well, we'll wait till we get a better report next month, when it gives us more
So in
detail.
terms of the website, from what I understand from Mike, and I didn't want to go through it line by line today, but there's about £1,500 for the setup and running of it, and then thereafter there's the maintenance. What I've said to Mike is maybe there will be benefits, but it should be a longer term goal, so I've asked him to do exactly what Council was saying and try and get some clarity on whether it will be maintained going forward, because there's no revenue attached to the opening high street.
Yeah. We'll wait for a better report next month. Okay, moving on, trees at Klondike. This was deferred from the previous meeting to allow the tree officers to discuss it. Have we had them discussions?
Chairman, no, Lee's been on leave for 2 weeks effectively from last committee. I've spoken to him today and he has said it's in his diary to do this week, but I haven't got an update because of annual leave really, unless Kevin's got anything.
Have you got?
No, I'm waiting for the Gill report, but the trees have been healthy all the summer.
Right. Well, we're going to have to wait then until hopefully next month.
We will have discussions this week.
Okay, Councillor.
I'm not saying this so that any other trees are identified for work, but if you drive along between Salterfirth and Northorne, these ash trees are probably in the best condition of the lot, and you get further down towards Northorne and you know there's some really badly affected by ash dieback. So I'm not necessarily wanting them to be looked at, but you know there are higher priorities, and I appreciate these are on council land, so people get twitchy and cover your back and all that sort of stuff.
We're going to have to wait if we haven't got any further detail.
It's become an obsession, and there's 31 trees, 10 times more dangerous than them that come there.
Right.
And they're overhanging major highways. So
We've got all of us.
Okay, let's move on. West Craven Sports Centre. We did have a meeting. Issues were addressed and various things were going to be done. Have we got any further with them?
Sorry, Chair, I have no updates.
No updates at all. From West Craven Sports Centre, the parking solutions.
I can certainly go back and ask for something. I can pass them.
Chairman,
And we was also going to get the engineering team was asked to draw schemes as well.
I'll follow that through.
It's the plans and the response from the school houses will be reported back to a
Yeah.
future meeting.
So we haven't got, we haven't got, we haven't found out we haven't got any updates. Yeah, Councillor Tomlin.
Chair, I can confirm that the school does do walking to school week and are planning to do it again this year, and that was one of the sort of mediations which we hoped would help, and I can confirm that they are planning to do that.
Okay.
I think we should resolve tonight to officially ask LCC to take part in this. Obviously there wasn't a representative from Lancashire County Council at the site visit we had, and we just need something in place to get them to
Well,
start
Sandra
doing it.
Farnell's on with it.
well, can I second Tom's proposal there, that we formally
do it.
ask Lancashire County Council,
LCC.
because I mean, one of the solutions, and we talked about it on site, one of the solutions involves using land owned by LCC for parking and drop off and pick up and all that sort of stuff, together with an improved footpath, and I mean we talked about tree planting as well, but insofar as the parking issues are concerned, that we need to get the county council involved with that element, and given that they built the school, I think it's quite incumbent on the county council to actually act before somebody's seriously injured.
Okay, so we can we'll formally ask county council this, if you can liaise with Sandra to find out where she's at with it. Okay. Right, item 13, polling stations. Any comments, feedback on the polling stations in this area? Councillor Tomlin?
The St Joe's Community Centre polling station seems to be over-prescribed compared to all the other ones in both wards. I mean, I wonder, does that mean people have to walk quite a while? It serves a bigger pool of people. You've got further walking, and obviously it's a lot busier. And I wonder if it could be looked into, if there's an alternate venue to split it so that people have less further to walk, and obviously it's better for everyone that way.
Suggestion? Yeah, Councillor.
Chairman, happy to look at that, but I was the one that actually proposed that we consolidate on St Joseph's.
So you're working against each other?
Well, it's a big polling district. However, it's a very dense urban area. It's mostly tourist housing.
Mm.
So
Splitting it isn't going to do any good, is it?
you're talking, you know, the furthest that people would have to go would be from Wellhouse Road, one side of Wellhouse Road, to go to St Joseph's. St Joseph's is pretty good, it's got level access, you know, you can drop off and pick up outside. The alternative that we did have in use previously was what is now the Gospel Mission on Wellhouse Road. The problem there is that it's on a bad bend, the parking is very tight, so not really parking for people going to vote.
Okay, so are we quite happy with how it is, or do you want them?
No, I think given
feedback?
those reasons, it's fine. I mean,
Yeah,
But
you're quite happy
if
with
people want to, you know, I'm quite happy for you guys to arbitrate between them and me.
So what do you want to do? Leave it as it
I
is?
think leave it as it is.
Leave it as it is, right. So quite happy with the overall ones. I'm quite happy with the early ones. Yeah?
Yeah.
So no comments to make then, just that we're happy. Okay, moving on. Item 14. Members have requested that the following items be discussed. Well, this is an interesting one. Changing places, toilet fund.
That was me, Chair. This is it's a fund from I think the central government to create. They're called changing places toilets, but they're for very specific disabled uses. And the fund is looking to provide them in touristy areas where someone with a disabled person in the family wouldn't be able to visit on a day out because of the lack of facilities. And the reason I put it down here is because we've now got the sculpture trail at Letcliffe Park, which, once we get that opening officially and everything like that, could potentially have visitors in, and it would just be a good facility to have there.
So what do you want to do?
Well, I've put it down because it's only borough councils that can apply for the grant. So although it's Town Council's land, they can't apply for it, so I'd like this committee to
apply for
through
a
Pendle.
grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I support that. There was funding for changing places back in 2013, something like that. At the time, it was really difficult to find places that could actually accommodate the changing. These are not, pardon, bog standard toilets. These are equipped with hoists, so that somebody, with severe disabilities are able to go. I coincidentally had a query maybe 2 or 3 months ago now, where somebody was saying, where is the nearest changing places toilet? And I had to say, well, it's at Com, unless there's any private facilities that I'm not aware of. So I very much support this. I think Councillor Tomwick would need to couple with the resolution, perhaps a request to Balnolswick Town Council to see if they would be willing to have the changing places toilet and
maintain them.
Maintain them in future. Yeah.
Have they not been asked first about this?
No, I wanted to see, because there's no point getting a resolution to support it if you can't apply, so I just wanted to see if this committee was okay to apply.
Well, we are, but I think the Town Council need to be asked before we apply to see whether they're going to be they're willing to maintain them.
We can...
There's no point applying if the Town Council aren't going to maintain them, is there?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, yeah. But we can resolve to...
Agree in principle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Apply on the basis that
on the basis that the Town Council could direct the Town Council to ask them if they're willing to maintain them. Well, we've got the Barwick Town Council
I
here
can't see a
tonight.
problem with that.
Right, okay, well that's great.
Yeah. Chairman, would it be possible for us to ask Ely Town Council if they would wish to have such facility in their neck of the
Don't go there. Don't go
I
there.
would support Councillor David Brook's
And you're
suggestion.
staring it.
Well,
No, I mean, that would be serious.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, let them. I mean, they have a problem up in the toilets they've got, but and keeping them open when they've got them for vandalism. But it'd be worthwhile having a look. I mean, let's
Yeah.
not, see what the costings are.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Right, okay. I'm glad there's unanimity.
Right,
God
swiftly
bless you.
moving on. Norfolk
Come back,
Community
Maurice.
Centre.
Thank you, Chairman. I asked for that one. Norfolk Community Centre was built in its current position when the temporary building was taken down where Whiteley's Close is now. It's a lovely building,
It's not used.
but it's not used, and there may have been the occasional birthday party in it, but
Yeah, it's not used
It's
very
not-
much at all.
not used at all.
Isn't
So
it owned by...
together, housing.
Together.
Yeah.
So, having got that facility all those years ago, it's a shame not to see it in use. And I wonder whether we could, in the first instance, resolve to raise the issue with Together Housing, perhaps ask for a meeting with them and see whether they would be willing to bring it back into use. I know there's people on Northam who are quite keen to make use of it, and Busy Bees, who can't open in the community centre at the moment, they wanted to see whether they could use it
Yeah.
but I mean, I think that's moving on really.
Yeah.
So
So we need to have a meeting with...
Yeah. request Together Housing and request a meeting.
Okay. Yep. Okay, Victoria Road here there.
Yes, Chairman. This one, and it was when we were doing the bollard inspection, you and I, an enjoyable period, looking at
Absolutely.
bollards and
Love looking at bollards.
poles
Yeah.
and planters and the like. The paving on Victoria Road is a big issue.
Absolutely.
And for all the furore about the length of time that it's taking, the new paving in the town centre in Barnoldswick is really good from an accessibility point of view. Very few trips, and much less hazardous and much easier to navigate, especially for people who are infirm or in wheelchairs or those sorts of circumstances.
It needs redoing.
So, I mean, I would suggest perhaps that from the Ely Courts Ward share of the capital programme, we could put a modest amount of money in as to get the ball rolling in terms of raising the funding to replace the paving, but more significantly request Lancashire County Council to fund the replacement of the existing paving with paving similar to what's going into Barnoldswick at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Cole.
Yeah, we've had discussions on it. The plan is to replace it.
Yeah.
We've reported the trip hazards and everything else, and we're having discussions with LCC. The problem we have got is that there's an element of, as David well knows, half the bottom end of that payment falls with the shop owners. There is a view that they would like to, within that area, they would like to maintain the old York stone flagging. Clearly that may or may not be possible. There wasn't even a suggestion of tarmacking it, which we told them that was totally and utterly unacceptable. We have had discussions. I've got a planned meeting with a cabinet member for highways, and we are looking at getting funding for it. Clearly, we would want to see if we could come up with some match funding, and we would expect that funding to come out in part from here, and also hopefully from every town council. So that's where we are with it. It was last cobbled together about 3-4 years ago. It did its job at the time in terms of solving a particular issue, but it was done very cheaply. So yes, we are in discussions, trying to see if we can get the funding together from LCC. Whether it should go down the route that David's suggesting, our idea was to put it out to consultation and just see what the residents want in terms of type and style. Because we've had quite a bit of lobbying about you're not going to tarmac it and do that sort of thing. And obviously the York Stone is there, but it's an expensive pastime to maintain that. So that was the plan, and to put it out there and see exactly what the residents would like, given a choice of various things. Further up the area, we can replace the tarmacs there in front of the good old close and tidy that area up. The other side is not in bad nick, to be honest. The problem will be at the bottom end and how we resolve the fact that the retailers or the owners of the properties own a third of the footpath. But yeah, discussions are underway, and the idea was to obviously earmark some money within what we've got. It may take a couple of bites at it, and depending how much is available from LCC. Their starting point was to tarmac it, which we're not going to do in a month of Sunday. So yeah, I mean.
So do we want to put some money into it?
Well, I think you've got to you've got some money there in the pot.
What do we want to put in?
I would imagine.
Chairman, rather than making a decision now, why don't we have it as an item on the next agenda?
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mike's suggestion about consultation, to actually organise a formal consultation through the area committee, and see what comes out of that.
Well, was LCC going to do this consultation?
No, it was purely
just a talk.
It's us.
So can we, right, well as a committee then, can we do this consultation?
Yeah.
And ask residents what they would like? What sort of
and that was the plan. We've done it before. And to get a feel of it, but we'll have to obviously give them some choices, but we'll see what comes back. But it would be, what we don't want to do is go down a route of either York stone or modern stone, and find that nobody likes it. We need to take them with us.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty with what's there at the moment is that it does delaminate, it is uneven.
It is.
And as we found in Barnoldswick, it doesn't have the longevity. I mean, the advantage of the stuff that's been done in Barley is, it's pretty bulletproof. You could drive a tank over it. Perhaps not.
Let's consult and we'll put it an item on the
I don't even think it'd be possible to turn them. I would imagine they've already been turned once anyway, the existing stones.
We'll put this as a standing item on the agenda then.
Yeah.
Okay. Parking in the vicinity of Applegarth Theatre.
Thank you, Chairman. This is something that I raised maybe a couple of years ago, and residents, William Street, John Street, in that neck of the woods, are concerned about the lack of on-street parking. Potentially it's possibly the visitors to the cricket club that are causing an issue. there was a willingness, whenever it was last discussed, to create a residence parking scheme, but at the time the county council weren't funding any residence parking schemes, and I just wonder whether it's worth exploring the opportunity to see whether the residents on a wider basis would be interested in residence parking.
I know we did a survey quite a few years ago around that area of residents, and we come back and said no, we don't want residence parking. But residents change.
Yeah, so I mean my suggestion would be that we ask Sandra Farnell if there could be a survey in that area, you know, come back with a report.
Yeah.
If it's got legs, we ask the county council.
Yeah.
If it hasn't got legs, we drop it.
Okay. Everyone agreed? Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Drainage on Stonebank Road, Westbrook Drive.
Where do you start with this one, Chairman?
Well,
we all know there's a problem.
yeah.
We know that there's a problem with Yorkshire Water, surface water sewer that's not taking it. Bless his cotton socks, the last time I talked to Morris, we were talking about this surface water sewer.
Yeah, when we had the meeting at Country Cottages.
Yeah, and Morris was saying, you know, it's goosed. I don't think he used the word goosed, but it's collapsed. And
I know I was going to get what's it to take on?
Yeah, Gareth is on leave just now. I've discussed it with him. We tentatively talked about the way in which we could perhaps get a permanent solution, and that revolves around Yorkshire Water. At the moment, our liaison, Pendle Council's liaison with Yorkshire Water, leaves a lot to be desired. In the past, we've had a lot better relationship, and that's not happening at the moment. But coming down Stonybank, there's a section at the top where the top section, it isn't the water doesn't go into a surface water sewer, and it's running overland, so it's from the bend, comes down past the farm, and it then goes into a combined sewer. And I mean, I got Lancashire County Council looking at it a few years ago. It then comes down the combined sewer, and the combined sewer surcharges eventually down at the bottom of Riley Street. Parallel to the combined sewer, there is this surface water sewer which continually gets blocked on Stonybank Road where the houses are, and every year people say, well, there's water coming out at the road and it's icy, and there's some digging done and the repairing section, but the next section is blocked. It's an old stone culvert and it needs replacing. So, to my mind, the game plan should be that we try and get funding from whichever source is possible to get that replaced and extended preferably, so that we take in the water in a surface water sewer that is getting rid of the foul sewage that's surcharging and the like.
Would it be worth trying to get a meeting with Yorkshire Water?
Yorkshire Water meeting with, and also, and I mentioned this to Mike, and I don't know Jennifer, but when I was on the county council, I badgered them about putting funding in for flooding and highways, and eventually, in the last budget, there was £5 million put in. So I think we ought to be tapping into some of that £5 million to try and address this problem. So between Yorkshire Water, Lancashire Council dipping in, we might be able to get a solution, and it will really boost the prospect and reduce the risk of flooding in that particular area. So that's Stony Bank Road and Water Street. And then Wencliffe Drive, I think those of us that represent the area fully aware of the problems on Wencliffe Drive. And we have got the prospect of some betterment as a consequence of the potential redevelopment of Spring Mill. But is that going to be enough to do the job? I understand that trial holes are being dug probably next week, the week after, to try and better understand what the issues are. I think as a committee we should be cited on what the problems are, what we can expect from betterment from the development, and what else may be necessary to try and ease those issues and reduce the risk of flooding, and in particular the problems that the people on Wencliffe Drive are having, where all the water's flowing through the gardens. Well, some of them are just a swamp. So, it may be a combination of things that we need to bring together to try and get things to happen, really.
Is it Pearl who's doing that investigation, or Pendle?
Well, the Pendle Council are paying for the investigation work out of the land drainage budget, and the gentleman's agreement is that, sorry, that's a sexist comment, isn't it? I don't know what the...
I'm not politically correct, so
I know you're not politically correct, I won't go there. But the Pearl have agreed to pick up those problems that are directly related to the site and the adjacent plot of land. What I'm fearing is that the issues will extend beyond that very focused Pearl redevelopment. So what I'm suggesting is meeting with Yorkshire Water, ask Lancashire County Council if they would chip in. We have a report back after the investigation works are done with a view to see if we can access any further funding if necessary to get a more extensive set of work carried out.
Okay. Everyone agreed? Right.
Yeah, they have had discussions with the Together group over Westbrook. There's a lot of caution from Pendle Borough in terms of not taking ownership of a problem that's not theirs, which could run into several £1 million at the end of the day. Together group denied all responsibility for it, so that's an issue. Yorkshire Water is not, it's nothing to do with, I'm talking about Wencliffe now, not Yorkshire Water.
Sorry, Chairman, Mike, you may not be aware, you were on holiday. There actually has been a burst in one of the properties on Wencliffe, and Yorkshire Water are supposed to be dealing with that.
Yes, but in terms of the water coming up, the one with the burst is at the far end, and it was running for quite a while before they solved it. Because we actually, Gareth and myself stood there and looked at it along with Scott Warley. The problem with the other thing, which is the water coming up from the ground, and why it occurred and why the swamp at Bailey Street dried up, seemed to be happening about the time when the Together group were drilling down into the ground and causing that sort of carry on. So it is a problem because there's a lot of private property on Wencliffe. There's also the Together group. Together group aren't taking ownership of duty of care for their residents where this water's coming up. So we've got to be a bit careful there. We've had discussions. It's on the agenda every month in terms of how we go about it. At the moment, David's quite right. They're digging these test pits to try and get a fix on it, on what's occurred. There is some views that it goes back as far as the reservoir at the top of Stony Bank there. That was filled in on agricultural land a number of years ago, and that started the move of water. So it's not going to be an easy one. There is certainly a reluctance at Pendle Borough to take ownership of something that's not their responsibility. So I can understand that, but having said that, we've got residents on Wencliffe who are in social housing we've got residents on Wentcliffe who are in their own property, and there's this water coming up out of the ground, and it's not getting any better. So we have to do something, but we are working, and I've asked to extend the monies available as well for digging the holes and doing the work. But it's not an easy one. Trying to find out who's responsible for it in the first place is going to be a difficult task, I guess. And I don't think we're going to tread a little bit careful. But yes, I mean, in general terms, I think that's the way forward. But we mustn't take ownership of something which is not Pendle Borough's responsibility. We might have a moral issue there, but the truth of it is it could run into a lot of money in terms of the private sector and the Together Group. And the Together Group is saying it's nothing to do with them, it's Borough. And they've got water coming out their own properties. So, yeah, it is a complex one, and discussions have taken place and are ongoing. But the other bit of it is quite right. I just think we just have to be very careful.
Okay.
Thank you, Gemma. I think I'm not suggesting that Pendle Council take ownership of the problem, but I think the key thing is that we have an organisation willing to problem solve and identify, what the issue is and potential solutions and who may be able to help in solving those. And the example I would quote is flooding at Gill Meadows, which clearly, when it started flooding at Gill Meadows, Pendle Council were responsible, but, and I'm not saying that it's equivalent to Wentcliffe Drive because the solutions are different. But what we did was we moved in, we problem solved, and we worked through, and in the end, I hate to think how much money we spent, probably well in excess of £1 million, but the money that we put in as Pendle Council, I think we put 5,000 in at the beginning, and we put 12,500 in when we did the flood wall. So the direct Pendle Council expenditure, 17,500, work carried out valued in excess of £1 million, number of residents with a reduced risk of flooding, innumerable, benefit, absolutely brilliant. So it's it's the approach, the problem solving approach.
So we'll wait till we get a report back on when we've done this stuff. But in the meantime, we'll try and arrange a meeting with Yorkshire Water. Okay.
And ask LCC in terms of their support.
Yeah. Okay. Right, widening of path through Barwick Town Green. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Although it does say for adjacent cycleway, that was just an aside. The main problem with the path on the Town Green is it's very narrow, and for wheelchair users it's not quite adequate. Especially with it being, a path to Craven side, ideally you'd want it to be wider. And a put for adjacent cycleway as well, because that's an excellent connection to get from one side of town to the other without cycling on the road or a pavement. And if a cyclist goes down it as it is now, pedestrians, there's a not a great dual usage there in terms of collisions. So I think what I'm asking for is a scheme drawn up by the Pendle engineers for the widening of, and I think with two options, one with a cycleway, one without. We'll see what the prices are, and if we can get funding for those.
And is the land owned by Pendle or
Pendle Council
Pendle,
land, yes.
not the Town Council? No. Okay, yes, Councillor.
Yeah, if you're going to put a scheme together, Tom, could you find out, because like I've said, I've had a few, but the carers have complained about it being dark. Now there is a light there, they don't work. Maybe, that could be introduced because the carers and the staff come through that area. It is dark, so if you're having a cycle path, you want to be able to be seen at night as well.
What you're saying is it needs to be lit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that would inflate the costs quite significantly. But I mean, if it's deemed necessary, they're open to that.
Support this, Chairman. Jennifer just mentioned the lights at Craven side, which are outside the building, which I've lost track of how long trying to get them lights lit. And they belong to the building. Lancashire County Council street lights are not interested in them. And I mean, I reported one as dangerous at one point because there were wires hanging out of it. So, you know, it should be Lancashire County Council, the care home owner, that sorts them out.
Okay, so...
It just, sorry, Chairman, in terms of widening the footpath, which I support, separately, the Onoswick Bloom Group has suggested a scheme of putting another, sort of like a decorative path, I won't go into the details, which would link off the path that we're talking about that goes across to Craven side and bring people out onto Welsh Road opposite the War Memorial. So that's one element. And the other thing is the Town Council has been looking at putting some bench bays in along that path so that people could sit and look out through the gaps in the trees over the town. So if the engineers are looking at the widening of the path, perhaps they could look at what it would cost to put the bench bays in that could be funded, not from Pendle Council money, but the Town Council might be willing to dig in for that bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody agreed on that? Yeah. All right. Outstanding items, meeting with local businesses. Do we just want to note these? Euravia, we are in discussions with them about a meeting. One of the things that they're asking for is what are the specific problems? Maybe Paul can...
as far as I'm aware, the specific problems are the same as they were a few years ago, in as much as it's the smell from the factory. Excuse me. And I recall that the resolution from the last time these problems were raised was that the chimney stack would be raised and a tall one would be put on. I think everybody knew at the time that that was just going to disperse it wider, so we are aware that the smell is now being picked up in a much wider area than it was, so it's not only the people who live locally, it's actually a bit further away. But all of it depends on the weather conditions, the prevailing winds, where it's coming from, but the bottom line is the smell of the aviation fuel that's coming out was essentially a tool exhaust.
Do we have any sort of specific times or days when this is happening?
Not that I'm aware of. If any have been reported to council, there may be some in the reported to the environment team, there may be some in there, but that's what we'd be recommending people should do, whether they have them or not.
This is to have this meeting with Euravia, these are the questions
I appreciate
they're
that,
asking for consultation. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I originally asked for a meeting to be set up with Euravia, and it was prompted by the fumes issue which Paul's referred to there. But the intention was to set up a liaison, regular liaison meeting.
Yeah, well,
this is something.
I'll just interrupt you there, David. Before they will agree to this meeting, they want they want an agenda of items what to discuss.
So
we'll do it.
So what we did with Wardle Stories, Union Royal Global, was we had an initial meeting and then we set up a liaison committee, and that liaison committee then worked through the different issues that we had, which were sort of linked but different issues. And so I think if we're going to specify to Euravia that we want to talk to you, what principally we want to do is set up a liaison committee. I'm going to repeating what I said 6 months ago here, comprising the company, Pendle Council, and representatives of residents from Kell. And then we can talk about the fumes. We can also talk about the on-side at the road parking that is taking place, which is causing road safety issues. So, you know, and there might be other things in the future. There could be a noise problem. So, you know, let's be clear, it's not just about fumes. It's having the process to deal with issues as they arise.
The environmental health team have been liaising with you, Ravia. It's just this one first meeting where they just wanted a couple of examples. They're happy to meet, and then after that they can open it up to the to other residents. But it's just this first meeting they wanted a little bit more information about. Because the environmental health team don't seem to have a record of complaints.
Right, okay. In that case, residents haven't been doing as they've been asked and putting the complaints in, which is what they're doing. So we've got parish council tomorrow evening. I'll raise it and just say that, you know, if residents want to have this, they need to do that. But I mean, we're kind of kicking this around a little bit. I think, you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could just ask Vicky Ravia and say, look, you know, it's not about specific incidents. I mean, I can give them a couple. I'll have to think exactly what date, but I know I've smelt it, and I've smelt it in various places out with the dog and by my own house. So I can vouch for the fact that there is an aroma, and it's not very pleasant. Whether I can say that it was at 2:30 on Friday morning or something like that, you know, I can't give that. But there are plenty of residents that can tell similar stories. So I don't know whether they want something that says it was 2:30 on Friday morning, or whether they can just say there are residents who can vouch for the fact that there are, on occasions, an unpleasant aroma coming from the factory, and can we just create some sort of forum where this can be discussed? And yeah, perhaps the road thing is, but I think, as you rightly said, the road traffic issue is probably only Arabia. It's partly to do with the garage, and also to do with some van that parks there looking at cars that go backwards and forwards really quickly, and they stop. You can't see past them, but I don't think they would appreciate you telling them they shouldn't do that.
Okay, well, we'll go back to you, Ravia, with this and see what they say.
Chair, sorry. Before we move on, just so that people are aware, Sandra's been in touch with me regarding Transdev.
All right.
I sent a reply back to her an email with a picture of the whiz bus this morning, and it was full. The double-decker bus arrived at Barnsley this morning, picked up half a dozen passengers, and at that point was full. When they arrived on Skipton Road, the bus sign was full and didn't stop at the chase. So I contacted Sandra back today. I sent her the picture with a list of other issues that have arisen from Transdev, and she is going to pick that up with them.
Thank you for that.
Chairman, on Transdev, I mean, this again goes back how many months?
Yeah.
Well, but more recently we asked for a meeting with them.
Still waiting.
And you know, we just want to be able to talk to them.
Have we actually had a response off Transdev?
No.
We got some emails.
I think Sandra has, which has been in touch with them, but wanted to go back to more specific issues. Hopefully now we'll be able to get on with it.
Okay. Just have to wait and see. Okay, D, costing for improvements to Gisborne Road footpath. Right, so Paul's going to come back to the next meeting for that one. Okay, item 16, exclusion of public and press. Sorry, Harry, but you've got to leave. Come on.
Right, cool.
On your back.
I'm just curious. I'm going out, that camera's still running, so what's the point of a secret meeting with that camera?
No, that's going to get turned off now.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know.
Do you want lights on out there, Harry?
No. You're not that light.
I can see.
So your wife said you could sit in dark.
Okay, are we off?
We are now.